Hello everybody, I am Tom and you will watch me play Destiny 2. Yes, Destiny 2, we're back. Coming into Destiny 2. So, today, Joe Blackburn put out a video on Twitter, and I wanted to cover that video and also kind of go into my thoughts about it. The video is going to be separated into kind of three-ish parts. One, it's going to be talking, just very quickly going over the dot points of everything that Joe talked about. That shouldn't take very long. We'll then go into my thoughts about it, and at the end, I kind of want to talk about the community response and why this has happened in the first place and why it's a very good thing. Alright, so to begin, let's actually go over the things that Joe said. I was just going to do a reaction video to that. You know, it's easy content, but at the same time, it involves finding my webcam. I have no fucking clue where that is. I haven't used it in like years. So, we're just going to go over the dot points of what he went over. So, first things first, he essentially apologized for the bad state of the game that came out. I'm sure everybody who is watching this video has seen the state of the game. It was horrible. I didn't even cover it. I was just so apathetic to it at that point. I'm like, my thoughts at the time were, Bungie doesn't care, why should I, essentially. But he essentially came out and said that was nobody's fault but mine, we didn't have time to work on it properly, we didn't clarify things, and it was just bad. Sorry. He then talked a little bit about the reveal that's coming out on the 22nd, I believe. So the big reveal that's going to be coming for the new expansion that's coming out, as well as covering, I assume, some stuff for the seasons following. Don't expect things that are really in-depth. It's more about the broad location and the story and the gameplay, big kind of broad gameplay changes. And he also, in kind of offhandedly there, he mentioned that it won't be talking about Xur revamp, HUD elements for buffs, etc. Live service changes after the final shape. Very interested to see what that's all about. But next, he moved on to PvP, starting out by talking about what they've been focusing on, which is sandbox changes, making sure that Strand kind of fit in with the other subclasses and it wasn't super overpowered or super underpowered. They were focusing on 2 weapon balance changes per season, one at the very start and then one mid-season, and more updates, etc. to the start of each season. So they wanted more modes, all that kind of thing. But going forward, what we're going to do about it, what we're going to change, is what he said, which is great to hear. Single map pack per year. And a map pack to me implies like 4 maps. At the very least, it implies 3 or more, because a map pack is not just 2 maps. But it remains to be seen what we get for it. But I'm hoping 4 maps per year. That's my kind of expectation. Already known about some of these things, but Checkmate is a primary gun-focused gameplay mode, which is coming out next season. We also have Relic coming out, which is more like Mayhem, kind of a party mode type thing, but it seems like it's going to be ramping up to Mayhem rather than just being Mayhem itself. So there might be a bit more interesting things in there. He also talked about the fact that they've been kind of hesitant or reticent to put a lot of these new modes they're making into the core playlists. The reason being there's like kind of little small bugs and jank that's kind of holding that up, but they're going to kind of address that. So they want to get these modes out of labs and out of just putting them in Iron Banner once, and they want them in the core playlist so you're playing them more often. So they're going to kind of focus really hard on cleaning them up with the jank and the small bugs and things like that, so that they can just release them into the core playlist so you're playing them more often. Also, small talk about comp, changing the way the points work, so it's less dependent on MMR versus MMR, and just more like, you win more games, you go higher, you lose games, you lose rank. Which is great, it just should be how comp works, it's how comp is supposed to be, right? And they're talking about getting modes a bit switched around in there as well. Less Rift, more Countdown Rush was the example he made. Also, the final part about PvP, he talked about making an internal PvP strike team, i.e. making an actual team to work on PvP exclusively. Big win! Incredibly eye-opening that doesn't exist already, but big win nonetheless. Talked about the last time they had like a strike team. I don't know if it was the last time they did, but he talked about a time they had a strike team of devs was between Curse of Osiris and Warmind. So a long time ago, for most people watching this, you weren't playing then. This is when they got the Masterwork system going for guns. They fixed a whole bunch of bugs and quality of life features. They just had a small, focused team. You fix these problems, right? So a PvP team, that just seems like a great idea. He talked about essentially what they're going to do is they're going to have a focus team. They're going to come up with the ideas. These are the changes we think we need to do. Then pass it by higher ups, i.e. Joe himself and their systems team. And then, notably, this will be announced and run past the community before implementation. So they're going to get the feedback immediately, essentially, before they do all the work to put all this stuff in. If they come up with something that is a horrible idea just on its face, the community's going to say, that's a horrible idea on its face. And then they may not do it. They may just say, scrap it before it even begins. Which, again, fantastic, big win. But that's all the stuff they talked about for PvP. Next, he went into armor. So there's been a bunch of controversy about the armor because they're saying we don't have the resources to make one armor set a year, essentially was the meme. But he talked about the fact that different armors have different categories that he's kind of defined either himself or just internally at Bungie, they have these, either way. He has kind of inspirational armor. These are from hard activities. So these are really cool looking things that you can show off in the tower to say, look, hey, I did the raid, I did the dungeon, I played trials, all that kind of thing, right? Next is silver, microtransaction bullshit in my mind, but the kind of design decision behind that is it's made to break the mold from what Destiny feels like. So if you have like a fourth wall breaking kind of sillier armor set, you can experiment with that more with silver, which makes sense, I get it. If you want to create something like they did the Assassin's Creed crossover or whatever, right? It makes sense that you're selling that separately. It's not in-game because it feels a bit, I don't know, fourth wall breaking and weird. Next, we have narrative armor. So this is seasonal armor, stuff you get from the season pass, stuff you get from just whatever the seasonal activity is. And that's kind of driving home a specific moment in time. Perfect example being Season of the Deep, their dive suits. And then finally, we have rituals and blue, which, to put it shortly, is basic bitch guardian armor, right? It's the really basic stuff. As a team, they decided that it was better to spend time on the inspirational stuff, the silver, the narrative armor, than it was to spend on rituals and blues. He then noted that this wasn't communicated pretty much at all, and he apologized for that. Final Shape is getting a new ritual set, but they're not committing to doing it yearly going forward. And I think, see, initially this really shipped me off, right? And the way it was communicated in the state of the game shipped me off as well. But I do understand where he's coming from when he breaks down kind of these armor categories. I don't know, it's interesting. As an apology for not communicating properly, they're going to have one of the Eververse sets that will be given as a ritual reward next season. Next, he talked about communications. So talking more using the official branded Bungie channels, Reddit, Twitter, all the ones that they created. He talked about having his team be safe, which makes sense. They had people getting death threats and things, which is obviously not okay. Like, it seems stupid that I even have to say that, but obviously. And obviously that's not most people. Most people are just complaining. That's fine. That's good, in fact. But the death threats are not okay, so he wants to protect his people. So they're going to do it through their branded channels rather than doing it through their personal channels. I'm fine with that. That's whatever. As long as you're actually using those branded channels and using them all the time, great. And Joe was talking about just doing live streams occasionally. Him talking to the community directly while he's live streaming. Big win. Also, big balls to do so because, you know, if you play like a bitch, people are going to call you out. Granted, I've seen Joe play. He's fine. He knows how to play Destiny quite well. So it's probably not going to be an issue for him specifically, but it's always big balls to live stream if you're a developer because you're making the game. So if something goes wrong and you're live streaming it, people are going to go, why does that happen? You're directly involved with it. So it takes some balls. But again, big win. Really good. He talked about doing this a couple of times leading up to the final shape, but honestly, I think he should probably just do this like once a month, once every 2 months, something like that. Probably like, at the very least, like once a season, right? It feels like that would be something that would be really good for community interaction. It makes people feel like they're being heard, even if he doesn't really say anything. If you're the director of the game, he's the game director, right? Joe Blackburn is sitting there on the computer playing Destiny, talking to the community directly. Even if he says nothing, it feels better, right? So I feel like that's a big win and you should be doing that every season at least. Okay, let's go into my thoughts now. I kind of already gave my thoughts on the communication, but I'll keep going on it now. It's always going to be a good thing when you're talking with the community. As much as Diablo 4 has become a meme for me at this point because of how bad they're implementing some of their things, the communication on the most part has been pretty good. The fact that you put out a patch, everybody hates it, and then they're like, okay, we're going to actually have a live stream. We're going to talk about this. Sorry, we're not going to do this again, right? The amount of goodwill that the Diablo team at Blizzard has from me is way higher than it should be for how much I just hate Diablo 4 at the moment. Like, I hate the way Diablo 4 is playing, but at the very least, I have some respect for the team because they seem to be wanting to communicate with the people. That's fantastic and should be done all the time. And I think if Bungie does this a bit more, it doesn't even have to be Bungie as a whole. Just make, Joe, you can take on all the responsibility yourself, right? You're the game director, you can do it. As long as it feels like the people are being heard, even if they're saying no, what you're saying is dumb, it just makes people less combative. And I think that's always going to be a good thing. Okay, going on and kind of covering the rest of these notes. First things first is a showcase. The showcase is going to be the showcase. There's no point in me talking about it until it actually happens. But the notes that he did talk about for the Xur revamp, that could be interesting. HUD elements, I've been praying for this for ages. The list of buff you have on the side of your screen suck balls in Destiny. They need fixing, and they've needed fixing for a very long time. The kind of little update they did to give you like the little symbols rather than the full wording. Cool, I guess. But I feel like what I want is a list of, I want it like an MMO. I want a list of my buffs, a list of my debuffs, and how long those buffs and debuffs are going to be up with an actual number. Give me that. And even if you don't want to overclutter the screen, make it optional. Make it like a setting or something. but I want that. Obviously, that needs to be a thing. Nevertheless, the last thing you talked about were live service changes after Final Shape. Wishful thinking for me to think that they're just going to get rid of them and just have an annual expansion every year, because that's not happening. They make too much money. But my hope is that it's going to be less focus on it, is my hope. But the reality of the situation is it could be literally the opposite. I don't know. We'll see. Moving on to the PvP. New map packs. Great. Maps are great. You need more maps. Any PvP game knows this. You need to have a constant supply of new maps, because even if you're doing the same thing, doing them in a different location feels good. If you're playing Control for the 500th time, but you're doing it somewhere else, it feels better. It remains to be seen how many maps we're going to get in a quote-unquote pack. I'm hoping for 4 or 5 a year, but that remains to be seen. A pack, technically, 2 could be a pack. I feel like that doesn't feel like a pack to me, but I'm hoping for 4 or 5 a year. That's my kind of expectation. New game modes, again, remains to be seen. Jerome seemed particularly excited about Checkmate, but we'll have to see. Until I can play them, I can't really comment on them. At this point, I don't give a shit about comp, but hey, maybe with the changes, it'll get me to come back in there and play some comp. I haven't played it at all this season. I'll probably play next season because it's the last season before I can get that sniper rifle, so I'll probably get the sniper rifle, and after I have a sniper rifle, I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm never playing it again. It's fine. And finally, we talk about the Strike team in their dev cycle. Yes, yes, yes. PvP Strike team, a focused PvP team, is necessary. Outlandish to me that you, in a game like Destiny, where you have at any given time about 30% of the player base is playing PvP. That's a huge portion of your game. You should be having a huge focus. Like, there should be a team that does nothing but PvP. That seems patently obvious to me. It's like, maybe I'm out of touch, but it feels like if you have a game like Destiny where PvP is like 30% of the people playing, right? You need a team focused on that. And even the 30, even if it's not 30%, right? Even if it's less than that, I feel like you want people playing the game all the time. The only real repeatable content for people who are at endgame is PvP. The reason you put PvP in a game, I mean, granted, it's a bit different for Bungie because they're coming out of Halo, which was PvP focused, right? For the most part. But the reason that PvP is there is to keep engagement. To keep engagement, you need your PvP to be good. To have your PvP be good, you need a focused team. That seems so insanely obvious to me that it's crazy that they seemingly just didn't have one. Maybe I'm reading that wrong. Maybe they do have one, they're just like putting more people on it or more funding into it or something. But the way that he spoke about it, it seems like they just had disparate people come in and say, oh yeah, we'll work on PvP for a bit and then we'll go back to doing our other stuff in PvE. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like they're getting a group of people from their other departments saying, okay, we need to focus on PvP for a bit. Everyone come in, do your bit on PvP and then leave, which is crazy. But either way, having a strike team focused, yeah, let's do this. We're working PvP, we're going to make a bunch of maps, we're going to make a bunch of changes. Sounds fantastic. Team solely working on PvP is exactly what we need. Also, getting the player feedback before implementation is huge and required. A great recent example of this is Baldur's Gate 3. The reason that Baldur's Gate 3 is as polished as it is, there are bugs in Baldur's Gate 3, obviously. I feel like I have to say that because every time you say it's a polished game, people are like, there are bugs. Yeah, of course there are. There are bugs in any game. But they're not game-breaking bugs. They're usually small visual things that get fixed with a reset, right? But Baldur's Gate 3 is a great example. It went into early access for longer than they anticipated. COVID kind of smacked them, apparently. But being in early access, it means that they could put things out, and then players said, no, this is shit, we need this instead. Or this is great, go more into this. Player feedback on your systems before you're finished making your systems is hugely helpful. And I don't know why they don't do this more. That's not true. I know why they don't do this more. It's because if they start doing something and then they realize they can't pull it off properly and people have seen like the start of it, they're like, yes, do this. And they're like, we can't, sorry. It's very disappointing, right? But I think people will be understanding, particularly the kind of people, if you're releasing this in, he talked about releasing this in TWIDs. I'm going to call them TWOBs for the entirety of my Destiny career. They're TWOBs, okay? The people reading the TWOBs or reading Twitter or watching a Twitter video from Joe Blackburn, these are the people who are heavily invested in your game. They understand if things don't work. They're not like the random Andes who are just playing Destiny, right? These are the hardcore people. You can tell them about the changes you're making and they will give you a good feedback on whether that's good or not, right? But that's pretty much everything for the PvP as far as my thoughts, as far as I can remember. I don't think I had anything else to say. Next up, we have the armor discussion. So as I said before, I am now more understanding of them saying we don't have the resources to put towards the ritual armors, right? If they'd explained it the way he explained it here in the state of the game, I don't think there would be anywhere near as much backlash. Because what it sounded like in the state of the game is we're not going to spend the comparatively minuscule amount of money to make a ritual armor set. When in reality, what they're saying is we're spending more money on our raid sets, our dungeon sets, the sets you get in trials, because they're cooler sets. They're the sets that people want to wear, so they're the ones we're going to put money into. I think the issue comes when you're talking about silver microtransactions, right? When you're releasing so many sets in Eververse, it feels really bad when you're like, well, the ritual playlist, the things that we want you to be playing all the time, Strikes, Gambit, Crucible, we're not going to focus on the rewards for that. Because that's what the armor set there is. Essentially, it's a reward for that, right? Like every single time they release a new ritual set, I farm the ritual armor set on all of my characters for all of the playlists. I do that. And that takes me usually at least 2 or 3 weeks. And I play a lot generally. So for most people, that's going to be like 4 or 5 weeks of kind of playing those game modes because there's a reward to chase. The transmog for it is there. So I feel like it seemed like such a cop-out. Even if I never use it, I want it there just in case I want to make a transmog of it later, right? And maybe that's me, maybe I'm an outlier here, but I feel like most Destiny players will collect everything in the game, right? Well, maybe not most. Most of the hardcore Destiny players, i.e. most of the players that are complaining about these kind of things, they're collectathons, right? It's a looter shooter. You want to collect all the loot. I feel like that, maybe I'm out of touch, but I feel like that's what most people are like, right? Like there are some things maybe you'll say, oh, I can't be bothered getting that because it's such a hassle. But playing the core playlists, I will play the core playlists if you give me an armor set to play for. Even if I never use the armor set, I'm still going to farm it. It just seems crazy to me that you wouldn't do that. But now I'm thinking about it, they are correct in that they want, like the ritual armor set looks like shit comparatively, right? But at the same time, if the ritual armor set looked cooler than the set you get in the raid, people would be annoyed. And I do get where he's coming from here more than I did before. Having said that, if you are not going to do a ritual set every year, then do what you're doing with this Eververse set next season. Just grab one of the sets that you're having from Eververse and put it in for the ritual. I mean, you lose money doing that, obviously, but the amount of good faith you get from doing this will be huge. And honestly, you could probably just get rid of the ritual set and just make it one of the Eververse sets. Pick an Eververse set, just pick it out of a hat, I don't care, and then make that the ritual playlist set for grinding. I would do that once a year, maybe 2 times a year would it be even cooler, right? But once a year, instead of going through the effort of making a ritual armor set, just take one of your Eververse sets and make that the ritual armor set. That seems like a good idea to me, but anyway. Alright, finally we have the communication stuff. I've already pretty much gone over this, but it's all good stuff here. More communication is pretty much always going to be better, and I think the best way to do this is to have, as he said, do the live streams, or even do exactly what you just did, right? Like, Joe did this video on Twitter where he essentially, as far as I can tell, no cuts, just sat there reading through his dot points, going over the things he wants to say, right? Do that once a season. Just sit behind a camera, do a 10-15 minute video waxing lyrical about all the things you want to change. Do this all the time, not just when this shit hits the fan. Like, the reason that Joe has come out and said all this kind of stuff, the reason that he's had to come out and say all this kind of stuff, is because Destiny's on fire. They put out a video, right? So it was like the past of Destiny, or something like that, or the great, remember the great things that happened in the Light and Darkness saga, or something like that? And they were just getting clowned on in the comments. To be fair, rightfully so. People talking about, oh, I can't believe they had the resources to make this video. But they deserve to be clowned on in something like that. You put out a video saying, look at all these great things we've done in the past, at a time where people are complaining about what the game is currently like. All that's going to do, it seems crazy to me that they would even do that. If you don't want to get clowned on, you need to describe what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you need to do that all the time. Alright, finally, the very last part of this video. I'm sure I've put something about this in the title. I may even go back to my intro and preface this a bit. But I want to talk about the community complaining and praising and dick riding and all the things surrounding that, alright? So first things first, clearly, complaining works. The whole community, essentially, has been complaining about all the things that came out. They were complaining about the state of the game. They were complaining about the state of the game and the state, in both senses, both the document they put out and the general sense of the state of the game. People have been complaining about it, and that complaining has resulted in Joe making this video. He would not have made this video if people weren't complaining. That is the very 100% the truth of it. This video came out, and probably these changes to PvP have come out because people were bitching. Bitching works. Commensurately, you also have to praise when people do the right thing. So again, thank you, Joe, for making this video. Thank you for coming out and doing all these changes. Thank you for communicating with the audience why you made some of the changes that people didn't like. Like a great example here, he came out, he talked about the armor. People didn't like the armor change. I didn't like the armor change, but having heard what he meant by prioritization of armor sets and focusing more on the inspirational armor, the narrative armor, more so than the basics and the ritual armor, I understand where he's coming from. But to understand where he's coming from, you have to communicate it, and the only reason they communicated it is because people complained. But having said that, now that he has come out and said it, great, give them praise. Give them props for doing the good thing, and give them negativity when they do the bad thing. It has to be both. You can't just do one or the other. Next, I want to talk about and this rolls into my previous statement about praising when it's good, but complaining when it's bad. You have an issue, I think, with a lot of people where they will complain no matter what. Like, Joe released this thing. I guarantee you, if I went through the Twitter replies, a lot of them are going to be positive. There's going to be a lot of them that are going to be people saying, too little, too late. You suck, this is crap, why are you doing this to the game? They're going to be negative anyway, right? That's not helpful. Equally, when the game is shit, when they do something bad, defending Bungie is equally unhelpful. And this happens constantly. You'll find it in any video that is shitting on the game, you'll find it on any video of, not even Destiny, just gaming in general, right? Anytime someone releases something that is bad, you will have people saying, yeah, it's bad, but you're not a game developer, you're an armchair dev. What do you know? You don't have to be a game developer to know when something is bad in a game. Just like if a car stops working, I don't need to be a mechanic to say that my mechanic didn't fix my car properly. And I want to think that this comes from a good place, right? When you're defending a company, I feel like I want to believe that it's coming from a place where people are saying, look, you shouldn't be mean. These developers are trying really hard, and you're being mean by saying what they're doing is bad. But unless you complain, you don't get a better product. You have to complain about the bad things, otherwise they will not fix the bad things. That is the reality of the situation. And also, as much as I say I wish that this was coming from a good place, and I want to believe it's coming from a good place, I don't think it is, really. I think most of the time, people who are defending, in this case, Bungie, right? I'll talk about this specifically, but this kind of works over all layers of gaming, but I'll talk about it in Bungie specifically because it's what we're talking about today. People are justifying their purchases. They spend $150 on Destiny a year, or thereabouts, right? It's a lot of money. That's Australian dollars, generally speaking, by the way. In America, it's like 100 US or something. But if you spend that kind of money on a game, you don't want to feel like you've wasted your money. And I think that's most of the people defending the game. They're not defending the game because they actually think it's good. They're not defending the game because they think you're being mean. They're defending the game because they don't want to feel stupid. And I think in most cases, that's the actual answer, which is unfortunate, but it is how it is. Next up, I want to kind of talk about the other side of this, right? You have the people who are negative no matter what, you have the people who are positive no matter what, and then you have the people who are completely apathetic. Now, most people who are completely apathetic, it doesn't really matter. When content creators are completely apathetic, but still making content for the game, I think that's where you run into, I don't want to say problem, but that's where I find it irritating. And that is where we're going to talk about Datto. Now, Datto specifically, right? I understand his apathy. He has been playing this game for so long. Why should he care? And I am also going to praise Datto. He's doing everything right. He's never bought a microtransaction from this game. He's never bought anything with silver. He's doing better against... You could make the argument that he is doing more to fight the microtransaction bullshit in this game than Astacross is. Astacross made this huge, great video. Everyone watched this video about microtransactions, right? But Astacross has damn near every exotic ornament in the game. He spends silver all the fucking time. I mean, he's rich. Who cares? Let him do it if he wants. But at the same time, if you're going to make this big video about microtransactions and then you're buying all the microtransactions, yeah, it's harder to make that argument. Whereas Datto is on the opposite spectrum. He never buys the microtransactions, but he gets annoyed with people complaining about it. He's like, why are you complaining about it? Just don't buy them. Which, it's a more consistent argument, at the very least, but I find it equally irritating. The reason being is that his apathy is understandable, but it's not beneficial. As I said, complaining works. Praising works. When people do something well, you praise them, you give them money. When people do something bad, you complain, you don't give them money. And I think what exemplifies this greatly is that when all of this stuff about microtransactions was coming out, and everyone was complaining about the game, and the state of the game came out, Dado put out a video where he was essentially saying, look, some of you need to take a break from the game. And I think what he was doing was looking at the very negative responses and saying, look, just take some time away, it'll make you happier. Which, that's very true, but it's not going to make the game better. The reality of the situation is, when the game is bad, if nobody complains about it, it will stay bad, but worse than that, it will continue to get worse. Because as it stands, the best way to make money in games like this is not to make the best game. It is to monetize it most effectively. And Dado had a big point about this a while ago. I think it was essentially his response to Aztecross's microtransaction video. And his point was essentially, I've given up on the Eververse. It's never leaving the game, so I'm not going to complain about it. I have a big issue with this. If you're right, it's probably the microtransactions Eververse is never leaving the game. That is correct. But unless you still complain about it, unless you complain when they introduce another armor set that is more expensive, they increase the prices in the microtransaction store. Unless you complain about that, it will keep getting pushed and pushed and pushed. Unless you put up a wall before them to say, stop, this is our line, we will not accept anything further, then they will keep pushing. Therefore, if you don't want them to increase the prices in the microtransaction store, you have to complain about the current microtransaction store. And people find that annoying, right? They find it annoying that people are complaining about things that aren't going to change. But if you don't complain about the things that aren't going to change, you complain about the things you don't like but are there anyway and are probably there to stay, you're not complaining so that that gets gotten rid of. You're complaining so that it doesn't get worse. You're holding them to account at a point where you're saying, this is my line in the sand, you've already crossed it, don't go further. Which is a crazy thing to even think about, that you're standing there and you're saying, this is my line, you already crossed it, hey, better not go any further. But if you instead say, the alternative is saying, here's my line in the sand, you crossed it, well, that's the other option. I'm kind of ranting at this point, which is why I separated this part of the video into a separate part of the video. I've actually split it up a bit, but I find in equal parts, right? I get that there are some people who are overly negative and people don't like seeing the negativity, but the negativity is necessary if you want the game to be good. The only way you get good games is if, one, they come out and they're great and they're never bad. That's a pretty big rarity. It happens occasionally. It does not happen often. Most of the time, you get good games where they come out and when there are bad parts of it, people complain. People give them feedback. It doesn't even need to be constructive feedback a lot of the time. Like, a lot of the feedback given isn't constructive. They're just saying, this is shit and I don't like it. That's still beneficial. It's always going to be beneficial to say, look, these are the parts I like, these are the parts I don't. You don't have to give them ways to fix it. You just have to tell them, these are the parts I like, these are the parts I don't like. That is hugely beneficial for the state of a game. Or state of anything, really, but we're talking about games specifically here. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm wrong. I'd like to hear people's thoughts in the comments, but big win for Joe Blackburn here. Thank you very much. I kind of want to end this video on a positive note because I kind of ranted a bit in the end. But big win here for addressing the feedback. Thank you, and I hope we continue to do this in the future. I've been Tom. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.